Dave, you're welcome.
Probably practice.
Okay. Do you have an objection to going early?
Hey, Heather, do you see it? Is Jeff on? Yeah.
I'm here.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, I'm surprised that.
Up to the podium when you.
Okay, well, since we are ready to get the next meeting started, and since we actually have a county official in here to handle some things like elections, man, Cindy was thinking maybe you wanted to have input on whether to start the meeting early or not. I was getting start early. Yeah, that was the body language.
It's a training and a work session versus an actual meeting.
Right.
I would advise if we were doing this for the supervisors, that's what I would advise. So
Thank you.
I just want to watch the basketball game.
don't be mean to me, Gary. And you do call it on your agenda, you do have the word training on here. So,
Right.
and you had work sessions somewhere when I was looking at it on the website.
All right, and no other business where we would be having a motion and seconding and that sort of thing?
No
Yeah.
other motion
Gotcha.
information, so that's what I would advise them.
All right, okay.
Your big important thing was your first meeting where your budget. And I just want to tell you, ours was 40 minutes long. We had a lot of questions,
Wow,
a lot of detail, what different things were, so.
got it. All right, well, thanks for that input. And I did learn that we are recording this, and if anybody didn't get the training and wants the training, they can come and watch it. We'll make that available for them, so nobody will miss out on anything. Well, let's go ahead and I'll call this meeting to order. Calling this meeting to order, we're again at April 1, 2024, slightly before 6 p.m., and this is a special meeting again, and it's for just one discussion item about urban renewal and revitalization training, with the exception of one person. Everybody else has already been in the room when we did the pledge, and let's dispense with that and go right on to the discussion item, which is urban renewal.
We need to do roll call.
Oh, roll call, yeah. I'm going too fast.
Kell.
Here.
Lottie Hoff.
Here.
Mitchell.
Here.
Nichols.
Here.
Schneider.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Very good. For the record, I'd like to watch the basketball game at 6 o'clock tonight too with the Hawkeyes, but we just spent a lot of time and money going out to Boston to watch Iowa State and not make it onto the Arizona basketball courts. Cindy.
Let me see if I can
Mike
find
is yours.
this. Okay, for those that are not familiar, my name is Cindy Kendall, and Besides being a retired finance director, I have also had a career in teaching and having other opportunities to. Oops. Okay.
After getting my hearing aids, those noises are really loud now. Yeah.
Okay, so Hector, we didn't fix this right.
Do you want me to open the actual PowerPoint?
I thought we did.
That's just the link from the agenda.
Okay, all right. Then I was wrong, Hector, sorry. It goes faster that way. It really will. Okay, thank you. Okay, so economic development, we have a number of tools that are in Marshalltown, and this presentation has been customized for Marshalltown. And so we need to know the things that we're dealing with, the impacts on our property taxes, not only for us, but the fact that they are actually going to be affecting the city, the county, and the school very heavily. There are other tax agencies that are included in our composite tax rate, but those are the primary three factors that this property tax would impede. There are tools here already in place, and we'll go through some of them, but the main focus is going to be on just two of them. And we also need to understand the relationship between programs, because sometimes you will want to do something for a developer, or you want to do something for enhancement of your infrastructure, and it will have a conflict with other things that are going on. The main two that we're going to cover today are Iowa Code File Chapter 403, which is the urban renewal, and we'll spend more time on that one. But we're also going to talk a little bit about urban revitalization and the interplay between that and Chapter 404 and the Chapter 403. We also have other local economic development programs, such as MEDIC and so forth, but we will not go into that kind of detail this evening. And then you also have been able to take care of a number of state and federal programs over the last couple of years as we're going through economic development, and also the enhancement of our community that was generated through the storms that we've had in the last couple of years. Okay, we're going to take the easy one first, and that's revitalization, also known as tax abatement. The main focus that I'm seeing in Marshalltown is in your area of residential and commercial improvements. And you can see that in Marshalltown, we have the tiered benefit for a person that they could choose, the 3, the 5, or the 10-year schedule. And that is based upon the valuation that they're adding to a parcel. And that is going to forgive the city taxes for that period of time. On the commercial side, it is a flat one option, which is 3 years for 100%. Now, the state also has an industrial abatement program, and those forms are made available through the state as well as the county assessor, but we don't have a formal format that I was able to find on that one, because that's just the standard for the industrial abatement. Now, on the bottom of that slide, you're going to see that I refer to House File 718, which is that wonderful legislation that has brought us all here this evening for this special meeting that we didn't have any activity to activate. But House File 718 also has a clause in it concerning commercial abatement. So it's touching the State Code 404, okay, not 403, but 404. That's the tax abatement that we're talking about here. And it's requiring us to have a new minimum assessment agreement. And this law is so new in that regard, and it doesn't take effect until July 1 of '24. They're giving us a long time to get this straightened around, especially when it's something that we're really going to need to work with bond counsel on. And I've had a call out to bond counsel for a week or two now to see what all that would involve. And I finally was able to reach him today and set a firm appointment with him so that we can bring those amendments to our revitalization plan back to the council for their adoption. And we'll have that done before July 1. I was hoping to get it done in April, but I'm not sure we can do that. We'll see what happens in the second council meeting. So that minimum assessment is going to, I believe, impact even the improvements to a property, so that if a person would add a room or a bathroom or something onto an extra footprint on that parcel, it would be eligible for abatement on that part of the improvement of the house. And I'm thinking that is going to require a pre-approval, and then the council will have final approval after the construction is done, and the county assessor has to sign off on those assessments according to this section, the way I'm interpreting it. But again, we want to get legal staff on that. I do not profess to be an attorney. Tools that we're going to cover today, again, is going to go forward instead of backwards. Am I going? We need to go to next. Okay, here's our debt service. This is the one that I want to be at. I'm sure that Diana and Maggie Berger from Spear have talked to you about this debt limit and the fact that it is 100% of your assessed valuation that we're going to be talking about, and that is 5% of it. I looked that up this morning, and you are at 2.186 million dollars of valuation, and then you have $108 million of the limit, at which you're at about a 70% limit at that point, and you still have about $55 million that's going to be available. And we're going to show you how that's not only available for your general obligation bonds, which you have for some of your streets and so on and so forth, but also some of your urban renewal work has an impact, or has a potential of having an impact on your debt limit too. And so we want to make sure that when you are approving a developer's agreement, you are aware of if it will or will not affect that debt limit, because as you know from the various storms, that debt limit was very important to get the community to stay on a rolling progression. So we're going to see how we're going to go with next on this one. The general services are primarily with the property taxes, and that has to do with not only police, fire, library, and administration and that kind of thing, but also the amount of support that you have for your debt. Many of those bonds are paid the principal and interest with property taxes, so as a result we have to look at the entire package of what's going on. But it's still important for economic development purposes, because there are other things that you can pair with that. And in your situation, your local option sales tax is one of them that is again blended together so that you have some property tax relief. And Diana gave you the amount that you're using for next year, and each year it fluctuates a certain amount, and as you know, the last election changed that percentage from what we had originally. And yes, I was here when we originally passed that. So one of the things that takes you down from that assessed valuation is, one of the factors is the rollback. and the rollback has been changed over the number of years. At one point, it was 100% for commercial and industrial and railroads. And in 2013, the legislature changed that, and they also added what was a multi-residential classification. So if you had upstairs apartments, for example, then that could be rolled back to the residential rate, which is always been kind of hovering between the 40 and 50% of the assessed valuation, so it's almost half. And then now the commercial and industrial has also been rolled back. And the first year it was 5%, the second year it was 10%. And now there is a caveat so that the first $150,000 of each building is rolled back to the residential rate. And then the rest of it is still assessed at the 90% rate. So they've got two tiers for commercial and industrial. There's nothing on the railroad. They also did away with the multi-residential. And so that is just strictly going to go down to the residential bracket immediately, because at once it was phased in. Now, during all of this, one of the things that the legislature said was, don't worry, cities, we've got your back. We will give you your backfill. They've got a fancy name for it. It's business property tax relief. We'll give that back to you. And the first 3 years, we'll give it back to you pretty much as you need. And then in 17, they capped it. They froze it. We're not going to give you any more than the value that you're getting this year. And since then, they've decided, oh, well, we're not going to do that. We're just going to phase it out over a few years. It could take you up to 2029 before you run out of it. But, oh, by the way, we have to have an annual appropriation for it. And guess when they cut that? 2 years ago, and they're cutting it more again this year. So every year, we really watch to see how much that's going to be cut back and how much the state is not going to do that backfill for us. When they took away the multi-residential, there went the backfill. They never did give us the backfill on the railroad. And in Marshalltown, there's a lot of value there. So we're just having to kind of balance what's going on there, but it's supposed to be an incentive for the businesses. It's supposed to be an incentive for the industries. And we have to make sure that they understand, and we understand, that those incentives need to have a payback as well. Okay? So we want to encourage the reinvestment in our community so that we can take advantage of those kinds of things. Any questions on that? I thought so. Okay, the next slide is going to give you a graphic for those of you who are number nerds like me about how it really works. And you'll see that on the very top one, you see 100% assessment for both the commercial and the residential. And then you'll see the next one is 100% assessment. And so we just picked some numbers that were really nice and round for me to be able to add and subtract. And then we look at the budget year value, okay? And the budget year is, like for this year, assessment year 23 is for budget year 24-25. So you see we've always got that gap in there. And so we're looking at that particular value. And in this particular case, both of them had some value increase from where the frozen base was at 100%. And then we have the other things that the state legislature is doing for us, and they're giving us more exemptions, okay? So this year, well, I guess it was last year, the exemption was for people that were 65 and older, and then it was also for military, and that exemption will go up even more. For the senior citizens, for example, it was $3,250. So that's there. And then on top of that, then they're giving us the rollback. And let's just say that the rollback's at 50% because that's a nice round number for me. And you'll see that 50% of the residential is a real easy one to calculate. But again, on the commercial and industrial side, you've got that two-tier, where the residential rate, which is about 50%, is on that first $150,000 of value, but the rest of the value, it's at the 90% rate. So when somebody asks me, what is my rate going to be? I say, well, where do you live and what what are all the circumstances? Because it's getting to be almost as complicated as the IRS code. It really is with all these things. And Iowa is layering things on and phasing things out, but it's still pretty complicated for the layperson to get into. Then you see here on the very bottom that we have a taxable amount for the base and a taxable amount for the increment. So I've been reading some of your developers agreements, and you're rebating, you're giving back some money that the property has promised to pay. So they're giving it to the treasurer, and then they're bringing their receipt to you and saying, I made my payment, so I want to have a rebate, and that rebate is a percent of the increment, the increase, okay? So that sounds like a pretty good deal until the developer comes in and said, but I want it on all of the tax that I paid. And I have been very pleased to hear that you're talking about only being able to do the increment. Because what happens with the money that goes, the property tax that goes into the base, that goes to the school and the county and the city general fund, and it has an impact on the other jurisdictions in a minor way. But again, I kind of like that three-legged example on that. And then the other thing is on this next slide to say that we have the frozen base and then the debt service for all three jurisdictions and the school's PEPL and their ISL. I can't for the life of me think of what the ISL stands for right now, but it's part of the school infrastructure program. Those are carved out. So if you have the blue line is where the building is or where the land is when we start, it's frozen. And then those improvements have the carve out before we can start measuring the increment, which is the green on this slide. So that property value is going up. Now, if we do nothing, that property value goes a third and a third and a third, okay? However, if we have a developer's agreement on it, the council can have staff certify that there is an agreement that has spurred a development or that is spurred a business of some type. And so then we have the ability to carve out some of that increment if it's certified in a timely manner and so forth. The city could carve out some of that increment. The city does not automatically get all the money for it. We have to designate that we need it for this project or for that developer's agreement. And so that is then captured and put into a special fund for the city. Now, there's a few more caveats to it. Let's say you've got a developer over here that is going to build a manufacturing, and you've got a builder over here that is building a housing unit. For the housing unit, the developer has a choice to go with that abatement program that I just talked about, or to get a developer's rebate agreement, or there's a third option that the developer could have a deal where the city would help put in a street or the infrastructure, which is normally the developer's responsibility. But on those housing developments, there's a thing called LMI. That's low and moderate income. If you have high-end houses, you're going to generate, by law, a pool of money for the low and moderate income people in your jurisdiction to benefit by it. And while I was here, one of the benefits that we got from the county's economic development on Harvester was that they were helping with a finance on a senior citizens low-income housing project. So it was in their jurisdiction, and the city has a jurisdiction. So we do not have to have it benefit those particular tenants in the development, but it has to be able to benefit someone. If the landlord is building low and moderate housing that's affordable, then that's fine. Then you can use that for their benefit on that particular parcel. And there's a number of ways that you can do that, which I will not get into because I can hear them roaring up on their warm-ups for the basketball game. There are 4 major types of units, and they're listed here: slum, blighted, economic development, which lists a couple of different things, and a mixed use. And some of the state laws, since 403 was passed initially, have shortened the period of time that a district can be using these tools. And so when it's a slum and blighted area, for example, the original was that it was unlimited time to take care of that problem. And now we're getting more and more restrictions on that. If you're going to build a new urban renewal area, you'll have to take those considerations in place. Some of your developers' agreements are slated for the slum and blight economic development, and you have some mixed use in your current development agreements. Now, the agreements, as you would put them together, is that it all starts with an idea. It could be a far-fetched idea, but we want to make sure that it fits into city goals and needs. It has to comply with Chapter 403 of the state code, as well as 15A, which gives the city power to do economic development through grants, loans, and so forth. And we have to make sure that it complies with the comprehensive plan. And that's when it goes to planning and zoning before it can be finally approved by the council, because they're going to be the ones that know the comprehensive plan so well, and they can then give recommendations to the council. And there's also got to be community support, and the projects have to be able to fit within a certain jurisdiction. So you can't have a spot over here and a spot over there that have 2 different goals and just kind of link the property together. You want to make sure that it fits into that district so that it is going to be comprehensive with all these other requirements. Okay, let's go on. There we go. All righty. So the kind of the route that you're going to go when you do have that idea that you want to start implementing, you bring all your partners together and you go through and you make sure that it's in compliance with all these things. The P&Z has to have that formal meeting, and then you have to have a written affirmation from P&Z. They just can't meet and just say, oh, that looks good. You know, it has to be in writing. You have to be able to document it. There's a number of public hearings that you have to go through. There is a meeting between the taxing agencies. So the city writes a letter to the taxing agencies and said, we're going to talk about this plan and how it's going to affect us and what our goals are and, you know, what development we expect to get into this. When, again, I'm going to go back to my experience, we had a large powwow, and all of the taxing jurisdictions were together, but we brought in the chamber and so on and so forth. And I was really surprised when the school superintendent was talking up so much about how wonderful this was, because he was looking at the student count, which is how his funding is brought in, as well as the property taxes that it might affect for a short period of time. It's all retro to the perspective of the agency. So that's why they have the consultation. And the consultation will ask if there are any pros or cons. So any of those jurisdictions can voice in writing their feelings about how this plan might be affecting them and so forth. And then we have public hearings, we got some more of those going on, and then the council finally does the adoption of the plan. And the adoption of the plan is not only the resolution for the plan, but it also has to have the legal map that goes with it. And then when you want to start using it and using tax increment financing, for example, then you also have to have an ordinance. And that ordinance is what gives the county auditor the go-ahead saying, okay, this is what we're going to start doing. And this is how we're going to start starting the clock for that reports that we need to give to that office. The annual reporting and compliance, that's approved by you guys each year. We usually try to sneak that in the last council meeting in November because it's due December 1st. And it's a humdinger of a report. If you haven't seen it, it's probably 20 or 30 pages long. But it talks about each of the districts, and it talks about all the dollars that have been committed in each of those districts and how far you are in your progress for each of those districts. And it's listed by project. So there's a lot of information that has to be compiled for that particular report. The mechanisms, again, is that the levies for all the authorities are applied to the increment. And then if the city doesn't need all the increment, those dollars flow to the jurisdictions that they belong to. And that's why we also want to make sure that, like you are being very consistent with your tax levy, you also want to be as consistent as you are with your rebates or your developers agreements, because you are impacting the ups and downs of the other jurisdictions. When there is a large project that it hits the general fund. And when you are going to have a large project, it's going to be probably a multi-year project. So again, you have that communication and you try to phase it in the best that you can. So that and when we do the certification, which is also a December 1 deadline, the county is given the information so that they're authorized to pay it to the city, or the college is also another agency that can have tax increment financing. But again, if we don't need all the money, then it's just immediately released. Okay, as closing, and I'll zip through these a little faster. I went through each one of your districts, and I wanted to bring them to your attention rather than just giving you a nice colorful map. Highview was the first, and that one was definitely a very small project. But on the other hand, this particular development area is still shown on your maps, but it is not active. I think we inactivated it a number of years ago. The next one is District 2, and that is your industrial development that was generated when Lennox was doing their plant expansion, and we were bringing in additional area so that the residential people that are benefiting by the additional employment for that area, as well as the additional school attendance and the residential needs in that area are all being considered. Right now, your southern area is very active with the VA construction and the McFarland building. So then the next one is number 3, which is retail on the south side of town, and this one has been very active through the years, and there are still activities that are going on in that area. One of them, that's one of the areas that you have used to help pay for your payments to the chamber, for example. It's not designated to that particular one, but it's in the certification in that particular area right now. And there's other things that have been through the years on that one. The South Retail and the loss of the drive-in is where those areas are. And then in the next area is number 4, and this area is the downtown, and you'll see that it is also striped vertically. Those vertical stripes are talking not only about the streets, but the urban revitalization district, and the Revite is stripes all the way across the city, because that's the way that we were able to qualify, because that's got a lot of blight energy to it, but that way the entire city would have it, so that all the homes that were improved or commercial businesses would have the abatement option for them. So that's why it's crosshatched so much on the screen. The next one is your District 5, and the District 5 is what you might call Wandering Creek. The plan itself has just got the designation number on it, but I found a couple of examples with Wandering Creek or the Eagle View on that one, and that one is not very active at this point, but we hope that's going to change. The next one is number 6, and Glenwood is the active development in that area right now, and we'll be bringing a agreement for your consideration at the next council meeting on that one. And then the last one is your north retail and commercial area, and that one you might know as the Carl of Marshalltown development that started the impetus in that area, but that doesn't mean that that's the only thing that can happen in that area. Having a Hy-Vee where it was pretty much only Hy-Vee that was impacted is very unusual. But it was the start, and it had to be used in order to get some of that land that was cleared with the Hy-Vee. So I'm not quite up to the starting point of the game. But on the other hand, what questions do you have of me, or what other information would you like on this kind of a thing that I just zipped right through? It's a situation where I usually have a 6 to 8 hour session to go over what economic development is when we have a statewide audience, because everybody does it in a little different way, but the law does have a lot of carve-outs that we have to be in compliance with.
Cindy, I know when you talk about TIF, there's people that think we TIF too much and all that kind of thing. I think we're pretty conservative with it, but there are cities that they just TIF way too much. I think like Coralville comes up quite often. They're very, very aggressive. Did their entire
city.
What's that?
Bondurant did their entire city.
Yeah.
That was the entire city at that point. They've annexed since then, but
Yeah, that you can TIF too much. I mean, you're getting really out there.
Again, because we have to remember that when we do a tax increment financing, the impact is on the general fund for those jurisdictions, so, we have to be mindful of that too, and we hope that we can always put a little bit of a carrot into the development, which will aid and, in the long run, include the additional valuation into all of their tax bases as well.
I'm curious about some of the developers that are out there talking to us and looking at things. What seems to be the trend or the more attractive thing, both for housing on the one hand and like the commercial development with the play-it space on the other hand?
We talked to a developer that's trying to come into Marshalltown for residential. And when he first called me, the question was, do you have tax abatement on residential? And I said, oh, yes, we do. And so that was very enticing, and the developer has come into town and has started talking to landowners about purchasing. But they're running into the same problem that a lot of developers are, and that's material supply and costs. So in that particular situation, the abatement would have been sufficient maybe 4 years ago, But we'll see, how things come out when they get the land price costs and all that kind of stuff. We have to have almost like a business plan before we can get to the point where we would be bringing any of that to the council. When you look at a commercial person, if they're going to be walking onto a bare piece of ground, it's going to be a much different developer's agreement than if you have someone who's coming in and reconfiguring or rebuilding something that is existing, or if they're rebuilding something that is become dilapidated and so forth. And so all those different things are coming in. I'm seeing a lot of 10-year plans, and it depends upon whether or not that is going to be something that we can configure and afford to do or not. But the ask is getting higher. And that's not just in Marshalltown, that's all over. That is all over.
Other comments or questions up here?
Your Honor, if I may,
You may.
where would they be developing, or are you talking right now, and how much housing, how price-wise?
Right now, all we know is that the price point would be about $1,200 to $1,500 per unit, and that depends upon if it's going to be a 2 or 3 bedroom unit, 1 or 2 baths, that kind of thing. We're looking at anywhere from 25 to 60 units, and that's on 2 different developers. It's not the same developer.
Hey, thank you.
Your Honor, if I may?
May.
So Cindy, we're talking more rental.
Yes, I think that's pretty clear. We have had inquiries about duplexes that would be owned rather than purchased. But again, when you're looking at abatement, it's on the homeowner that can get that, where they can't get any tax increment financing incentives.
If, what would help me is if I email you some specific things we've done since I've been on the council, could you look at those specific ones, tell us what we did right, what we did wrong, share that with the rest of the council so we know better specific guidelines on projects we've done, so we know what to avoid in the future, the ones that didn't pan out as well? And I don't want to say that out in the open here. I'll just email that to you.
Well, one of the problems with that is I can only give you the face value critique. I cannot tell you the time and place that it happened. Especially in this community, you've been devastated by 2 terrible storms. And so the result was, we've got to keep our people here. We've got to keep them in school. We've got to keep them in worthwhile living conditions. So the impetus at that point was greater than it might be today, even though we are short on housing here today. I just want to give you that disclaimer right off the bat.
Anyone else? I will say this, I'm so glad to have you in town. Oh, my God. This is complex stuff. And I see, John Hall's here, Hector's here, one of our recent people who wants to invest in downtown is here. This is important stuff for us, and it's nice when a developer knocks on our door that you're here to talk their language and figure out what can happen. I don't know how anybody can anticipate what the legislature's done or what this law is going to mean when it goes into effect on July 1.
And there are a lot of other laws that are impacting us right now. I mean, there's a number of classes of employees that they're looking at for incentives, so they're going to give them homestead, or they're going to give them tax deductions and so forth. So they're not done. It's just a matter of being able to anticipate when the laws get passed, how are we going to be able to maneuver and still survive and give the services that we need to give, because, equipment and employees are all we've got. And we've got services that we want to boost the level on. Go ahead.
One last question, I guess maybe not so much a question. Good developers are hard to find and hard to bring up here to Marshalltown, isn't it?
To be honest with you, I have never recruited a developer. Even when we were doing the retail, they came to us. But we have Medic, we have a chamber, we have neighbors that talk to friends. And those are the people that are going to come here and really invest in the community. We were involved with a program that the economic development had at the state level where we could get certain things prepared in advance, and they would have blind visitors come in and test us. And when I was in my former cities, we tested well, and when they came here, we tested well. But that was just about the same time that we had the Lennox situation. And again, when you have an active medic and you have an active chamber that are doing the things in advertising and all those kinds of things, that gets the word out. The trails, that gets the word out. You know, your bike stuff is so popular in the state right now that you automatically get some free publicity when you get a trailhead open up.
I heard on public radio today an ad that Mason City got on public radio. So they're donating to the Iowa Public Radio to talk about their trails and the developments they have and the accoutrements and things that are standard, the standard of living if you can be up in Mason City. And damn it, we're competing against them to get cops and firefighters and people like that.
And the competition is just employees as well, you know. If you don't have the housing, you're not going to get the employees, and if you don't have the employees, you don't get the education. You know, it's a circle for everything, and keeping up our training programs in Marshalltown, at the college, for example, it's critical that they get that at home, so we don't have to send them like we do for cops. We have to send them to the academy for weeks and weeks and weeks. That's expensive when you have to do that for 200 or 300 employees.
It's fun to watch the developers that have come up here are liking what they've done and continuing to look for other things to develop. That's been a good sign here.
Well, the other thing is that you've got people coming home and investing. You know, that was something that really struck me in the small time I've been back and attending council meetings.
We've had two of those boomerang investors come here and see us in the last 3 months, and that's been
Yep.
fun. I can think of Conlon, you know, they're finishing that building over by the post office, looking around for another place to build. There have been two other developers I can think of that have put together buildings and are.
And we've also had campaigns where we go to the current industries and saying, what do you need? What kind of things do you have in your future so that we can make ourselves ready so that we can say, well, you're going to have to do this to the streets, so you'll have to do this for fire protection or whatever, so we can be proactive in their planning as well.
Other council comments? We didn't have public, I didn't intend to call to the public to comment on this, but everybody in the public will know that you are our resource here to figure these things out, and everybody up here knows that too. And people that missed tonight will have this PowerPoint and they can watch the program. So unless anybody does have anything else, I'm tempted to adjourn the meeting at 6:25 and say, go Hawks, and thank you much. We're adjourned. Yeah, that was a good short course. Go. Did. that.
Oh, she's probably got better than Oscar.